your live chat earlier, the petition, up to 146,000 people now. And I don't know if you saw or not, but people are leaving little videos on the petition as well.
Homie needs to be stripped. He was being a coward.
So a bunch of comments as well with a general theme of how it's unfair to other fighters, ruining the sport. You know, that if the UFC needs to make the right decision, they need to strip him. Basically, people are talking about how disillusioned they are in the UFC because of the whole process. Did you ever imagine that this is going to turn into this kind of shit show that it is now?
This is boxing. This is boxing. This is how boxing goes, where fans get tuned out because they cannot rely on the stars to make the fights that they want to see with any kind of reasonable degree of regularity. This is boxing. And the fact that he fought Stipe is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, you know, why isn't Canelo fighting David Benavidez and he's fighting, you know, well, William Skull was a mandatory, but, you know, Berlanga or some dumbass shit. You know what I mean? Like, why is he fighting these guys that he should not be fighting? Well, because it's Canelo and he can do what he wants. And that was, I mean, Dana White, did he not tell us that like he structured the UFC to do the opposite of what boxing is doing? Wow, look what's happened. It's actually turned exactly into the same thing. This is boxing. This is how boxing goes. This is boxing fandom. MMA fans sound exactly like boxing fans when they complain about this. And what's really weird about that is, like, you know, you can't blame a sanctioning body. There aren't any in MMA. You can't blame a rival promoter for not making a deal. There aren't really any. That's not really the issue here at all. It's strictly the UFC's choice. People ask me all the time. They ask me all the time, you know, oh, what's really the downside of monopoly? Welcome to it. Take a nice long look at it. You don't have a choice. This is what you get. And it's either take it or leave it. So congratulations.
In hindsight, how much of a mistake was it to make this Jon Jones Stipe fight?
Oh, God. Dude, fuck everybody who supported that fight. Fuck every last one of them. I'm looking at some of you right now. And if you admit the mistake, then I'll let you live. But what a stupid ass argument. He didn't deserve a title shot to begin with, right? This is not an indictment of Stipe's career, because his career is legendary. He has had a very distinguished UFC heavyweight run, and we all thank him for that. But by the time that fight was made, it was made as some kind of PR thing. Oh, we'll have the best light heavyweight versus the best heavyweight, and then we'll use this to make some kind of a big fight. And I can at least understand the pitch. It was totally nonsense when they did it, but there's at least some kind of sales angle that you could understand. And at the time, you know, Tom was still trying to figure things. Well, that's not true. He was on his way, but you get the idea. Like I could, it made no sense, but I could look the other way. But the true mistake is after Jon gets injured and then they still decide to make it all this time later. Now, that fight did not do poorly at the box office because Jon is a big star, and I understand that. I'm not saying it was that the market did not reward them for this. But one, the market rewarded Canelo for fighting Berlanga, and that fight was a gigantic waste of everyone's time, not competitive, but Canelo couldn't even finish the job because that's just what's happening now. And in a similar way, we did get a finish, obviously. Jon did look good for his part or whatever, but the point I wanted to make was, if you never make the rematch, or sorry, if you don't go through with the second booking, essentially, we have solved this problem already. We're not here anymore. It doesn't exist. And the people being like, what, we can just change course? Yes, you fucking idiot. Yes. That is exactly what they can do. That is exactly what they should have done. We wouldn't be here today figuring out when, like, maybe Jon will fight again. Maybe he won't. Maybe we'll hear in a month. Maybe we won't. And time ticks by, and neither him nor Aspinall has fought in 2025. All of this is a consequence of going back to a fight that should have never been made to begin with. They had a chance to course correct, and they chose to do the opposite for reasons that remain very unclear to me. I guess what, they weren't going to get Jon again? So fucking what? What was the point of that? He fought a fucking corpse in Stipe Miocic that night. Did anyone learn anything about Jon's ability at heavyweight when Stipe was barely ambulatory that night? Like, what are we talking about? This is boxing. This is boxing. Congratulations to everybody. Welcome to boxing, just with MMA rules, because that's what you're getting. They made a terrible decision. And one more, by the way, it should not get lost here as we're talking about it, aside from the fact that Stipe Miocic fight was a gigantic mistake, huge, epic mistake. But beyond that, getting sideways with Francis has not been great either. Because the point I've been trying to make to people is, even if you just left Jon and Stipe to do what they were going to do with that time, stupid ass fights, but whatever, you let them have it. If Francis was here, at a bare minimum, we could have gotten 2 Tom versus Francis fights, right? Because it would imagine what it was, one would have won and they could have done another one in a rematch in short order. You could have gotten 2 of them, but we're not even getting that either. Oh my God, folks. Welcome to boxing in 2025. It looks a lot like MMA.
Just finally, a lot of people have asked me this. I want to ask you the same question. Usually Dana White comes out on top of negotiations. He cuts people off at the knees. He takes titles, opportunities. We've seen people do a lot less to Dana White that we've never seen from again, or have never gotten an opportunity again at the highest level. What is, and obviously Jon Jones has had so many downs with Dana White. They've had so many issues. What is it in this situation? Why do you think Dana White has given him the benefit of the doubt to this degree over so many people in the past here? What is it about Jon Jones, do you think, for Dana White that just makes him so obsessed about treating him so differently to some of these bigger superstars in the past that he just would not even negotiate with?
So a few different theories. We should sort of list them here. One is that the idea is they're holding Jon versus Tom as a big fight that they can make with a new television deal. Now, in order for that to make sense, that means they're not putting the fight until 2026, which,
oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, I can't rule that out. That you couldn't rule it out, but I don't think that's the likeliest. I think that if we don't get an answer by whenever it's time to announce a main event for November when they return to New York City, I'm guessing that we have to get some kind of an answer there. So it could be that they're holding it for a television deal, but I don't find that to be very true. That's the first thing I'm going to say. Second of all, they're right in one sense, which is this fight is much bigger if it's a heavyweight unification, right? If it is one guy walks out with the title, another guy walks out with the title, and then boom, you have that on the poster, you have that to sell, you have that at press events, you have that for media week. It does make a difference. Okay. So that's not a reason to ignore what the situation is, but I'm saying that probably plays some role that they don't want to strip him on that one. But I think the bigger one is sort of relatively obvious. Yes, it could be helping in current negotiations, right? They don't have a deal signed yet with ESPN or Netflix. I think there's actually a desire to make this fight now as a way to show what kind of pay-per-view returns that they can get, in the sense that understand something, right? So ESPN for a UFC pay-per-view pays them $20 million per event. Oh, and wow. Which is a significant amount of money. I mean, I have to see what numbers would be in terms of what they take home on pay-per-views, but you have to sell, I think well above 300,000, well above that to recoup your money. And I think a lot of them aren't doing that. Now we'll see what happens with Ilya at 317, the whole summer, really. But the point I'm trying to make is, beyond that summer, when you have September, we don't really know who's going to be headline. It could be Volk Yair too, which is dead letter. Zero appetite for that. October, I don't know what they'll do yet. They'll go to Abu Dhabi, but I guess we'll have to see. Maybe Islam JDM, which would be great. I mean, that's sick, but we'll see. And then November, this one. But beyond that, when you're thinking beyond the calendar, it's just really hard to know what's happening. And I think if you just take a look around, dude, the UFC doesn't let themselves. They don't like being made to look weak, and they look weak. They look weak here. They look like they're doing Jon's bidding. And it's because I think they feel like they really need to make this fight, one, because, not delivering on a series of big super fights and, Couture, Lesnar, or Lesnar, Fedor, and GSP, Silva, and then, the other ones as well. But now this one too, I think would be a very, very bad look for them. And I think they're trying to avoid it. But more to the point, if you're trying to buttress your business and you're trying to project strength, this obviously undercuts it to a degree, but I think what they're trying to say is we can still deliver the big fights. We can still deliver something that returns at the box office, that's good for our partners, that's a big grand spectacle. And Tom versus Gon is just not even close to that. Tom versus Jailton Almeida is just not even close to that. It's sort of like a question of like, how are you guys a monopoly and you can't do the biggest fights? If you can't do them, who can? But again, one more time, some of this could have been, there's architects of their own problem, because having Francis there could have ameliorated a fair amount of this, at least in the short run, but it's only compounded their problems.
How do you think this would look for Dana White if this fight didn't come together? I mean, we've spoken about the UFC, but like recently he was supposed to promote that big boxing match, seemingly got pulled from that. People have been saying, hey, this guy hasn't had his head in the game when it comes to the UFC for quite some time. We've seen him absent from events, absent at press conferences where he doesn't really know what's going on with any of the fighters on the card. But this was kind of the big thing that he hung his hat to. Jon Jones, pound for pound, the best in the world, blah, 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 blah. He kind of built this whole narrative out as a joke and almost like as a little entertainment factor. But now if this fight doesn't come together, does it kind of hurt a little bit his perception of him as a promoter? I mean, he hasn't kind of had the greatest year, if you look at things, the way they've been playing out.
It's a good question. It really depends on your perception of him as a promoter, whether or not you have a high or a low opinion of him. But in answer to that question, I certainly think that would be a terrible look. I mean, when the UFC is operating from a position of strength, right? We have total belief in our calendar. We have total belief in our pay-per-view future. We have total belief in our roster. They would never allow this. They would never allow this. It would never happen. And I've seen them do this. I've seen them. Dude, Jon Jones is, granted, it's for other reasons, but Jon Jones is the most stripped fighter that they have. So it's not like they haven't done it before. They've done it to him more times than they've done it to anybody else. Like, this is not like, this would be like routine for them, this is, but if they are not acting in that way, it's because they cannot operate from a position of strength. And I think that kind of gives the game away here a little bit, how they feel about what's going on. Not so much about like a threat to their business, but about what the business can ultimately deliver in the end. Not that anyone can overtake it, but just what can you do? What is your capacity and what can you deliver on? Also for your stakeholders, because getting back to that 20 million for ESPN, remember, they're going to want more next time. Like, are they going to want 30 or 40 million for a pay-per-view? Like, who the fuck's going to sell that? So there are these big questions about like what kind of numbers and ultimately what kind of events you can do. But you're asking, would it make them look bad? I mean, listen, part of promoting is being made to look bad sometimes. And what I mean by that is, like, Eddie Hearn will get out there and promote his guys, and sometimes he wins big and he looks great, and all the stuff he said pre-fight was like right on the money. And then other times he gets out there and he just looks like a clown because he had to say dumb shit and to like, to big up his guy who got waxed and shouldn't have been in there and, was questionable matchmaking to begin with. It's just part of the shit. It's like, it's part of the job. Part of the job is having to eat shit at times. But the thing is, if you got a monopoly in the sport, the amount of times that you have to eat shit is pretty minimal, relatively speaking anyway. This is such it's the outlier of all examples, because to the point you raise, it's not just about the failure to make it, if that ends up being what happens. It's the groundwork that you indicated that he had laid, all this, talking to Jim Rome, talking to media, and talking to Instagram Live, everything he could possibly do to put Jon over, he did. And then for all of that to then just crumble in the end, it would be quite a bad look. And then on top of essentially getting benched, or I don't know what you want to call it, for Canelo versus Crawford. I mean, I remember the days that Dana White was singularly focused on the UFC brand and was a bulldog for it. And he had to eat shit on some of those days too. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like it was all sunshine and flowers. But what I would say is we're a pretty far cry from that.
Quickly, this weekend, some fights are going down. He didn't want to fight Gamrot, didn't want to take this fight. Obviously, Gamrot fighting this weekend. I just want to get your take on it. Do you think Arman, a lot of people are sort of discussing, did Arman make a mistake by not just taking this fight? Obviously, it's a difficult fight. because Gamrot is not an easy fight, but it's a what have you done for me lately business. It would have kept him in the discussions and sort of maybe moved him closer towards potentially a title shot? Or do you think he did the right thing by sitting out here and just seeing how things play out? What's your take on what Armin's decision ultimately was?
It's one of those things where, once again, that you have to wait and to see how everything plays out. So it is a risk that he's taking, but I would have made the same risk in his position. He was already going to get a title shot. Now, granted, the sport moves on. He's almost certainly going to have to fight again. So now you have to figure out who I'm going to fight. If I were him, I would wait for like Patty. If I were him, I would wait to see what happens with, Max and Dustin. If I was him, I'd be careful about, taking that one. He already fought Gamrot once and lost. Now, I thought he won that one, but Gamrot doesn't, it means a lot. Gamrot's a great fighter. It means a lot for your resume in terms of quality, but it would do nothing for him promotionally. He was already in the catbird seat. Yeah, he should be selective. Now, that doesn't mean by being selective, he'll guaranteed he'll get a better result. You're just playing the averages. But I would say he has a decent chance of being able to recover here if, for example, they make the Patty fight or another fight with a name that fans can get really excited, Gaethje or something, whatever. So something along those lines. I think the fans would completely forget about this episode and he'd be right back in it.